Before we begin this incredible tale, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Now lean in, because what you're about to hear is a story the desert winds never forgot. Out in the far reaches of the Southwest, where the land was dry, the law was thinner than paper, and trust was a currency most couldn't afford, lived a man named Elijah Granger. A former Union scout turned rancher, Elijah carved out his life from the dust with bare hands and the kind of silence that only came from deep wounds. Folks around called him the Iron Rancher. Not because he was cruel, but because he was unshakable, unreadable, and unforgiving. No one ever saw him smile. No one dared knock on his door. He rode into town only when he had to, always armed, always watching. Rumor had it that he hadn't let anyone on his land in over 12 years. Elijah's ranch was a fortress of solitude. Tucked behind jagged cliffs and thorny mesquite, it was protected not just by geography, but by legend. Kids whispered about the man with eyes sharp as a hawk and hands quick as lightning. Cowboys avoided the trails near his land. Drifters turned around when they saw his branded gate. He had no cattle hands. No dogs. Just one old stallion, a Winchester rifle, and a past he never spoke about. The townsfolk speculated endlessly. Some said he lost a family to bandits. Others believed he was once part of a renegade unit that betrayed him. Whatever the truth, Elijah trusted no one. Not lawmen. Not preachers. And especially not strangers. His world was controlled, cold, and completely his. Then came the day the outlaws arrived. A strange sight for the quiet mesa. 5 of them, riding fast and reckless, dust exploding behind their horses like smoke from a cannon. They didn't head for the saloon. Didn't aim for the bank. They went straight for Elijah's land. No hesitation. No warning. They crossed the outer fence like they'd been there before. Elijah watched them from his porch, silent, unmoving, hand hovering near his rifle. These weren't just any drifters. They looked wounded, desperate, hungry. Their leader, a woman with blood on her jacket and fire in her eyes, raised her hand and called out, "We're not here for trouble. We need help." Elijah didn't flinch, didn't speak. His silence screamed louder than gunfire. And yet, he didn't shoot. They dismounted slowly, cautiously. Each movement calculated. Elijah noticed it. These weren't greenhorns. They were trained, seasoned. The kind of people who had fought too many battles, both on the land and inside their souls. The woman spoke again, this time closer. "Please. We've got injured. We just need shelter till nightfall." Elijah's jaw tightened. The last time someone had asked for shelter, it had cost him everything. But something in her voice, raw, cracked, honest, cut through the stone in his chest. He pointed to the barn with the tip of his rifle. No words. Just a gesture. They took it, grateful but wary. No one thanked him. No one dared. Inside the barn, the scent of old hay mixed with iron and sweat. One of the outlaws, a young man with a gut wound, groaned as he was laid down on a saddle blanket. The woman, who introduced herself only as May, got to work. She wasn't just their leader. She was their medic, their moral compass, their backbone. Elijah watched from the doorway, still silent, still measuring every move. He saw how she tore her own shirt to make bandages. Saw how her hands shook, not from fear, but from exhaustion. She was no common criminal, and that confused him more than he cared to admit. What kind of outlaw fights with honor? As the sun dipped low, painting the barn in shades of orange and blood, Elijah brought out water and a bucket of boiled potatoes. He didn't say a word, just placed it near the barn door and stepped back. May looked at him, surprised. "Thank you," she whispered. That night he didn't sleep. Sat on his porch, rifle across his lap, eyes on the barn. Memories clawed at his mind, Memories of another night, another stranger, another mistake. But this felt different. Still dangerous, yes, but different. These outlaws weren't hiding from justice. They were running from something darker, something worse. By morning, the young man's fever had broken, but the danger hadn't passed. May approached Elijah with a folded map and truth in her voice. We didn't rob a train. We stopped one from being hit by Delgado's gang. Elijah's brow twitched at the name. Delgado was no ordinary bandit. He was a butcher, a phantom, a killer dressed in silk. He's after us because we burned his stash. We couldn't let him poison another town. Elijah's silence lingered like smoke. Then he said his first word in 2 days. Why come here? May met his stare. Because they say you're the only man Delgado fears. Elijah's fingers curled tighter around his coffee mug. The weight of her words sunk in slowly. He hadn't heard Delgado's name in nearly a decade, but it triggered something in him, a ghost he'd buried under layers of solitude. Years ago, Delgado's men had come for Elijah too, and that night ended in blood, fire, and the loss of his younger brother. No justice was ever served. No revenge taken. Just silence. May saw the change in Elijah's eyes. We're not asking for much. Just help us get across the border. Elijah stood. Walked away. But that night, he moved something he hadn't touched in years, a buried chest beneath his floorboards. Inside, a worn map, and vengeance long overdue. The next day, Elijah spoke again. 3 words. You'll need horses. It was the closest thing to a yes May had hoped for. They spent the morning preparing, saddling up, patching wounds, checking ammo. Elijah didn't say much, but he watched, taught, pointed out terrain routes. He knew every crack in the land, every dry riverbed and hidden pass. May's crew was skilled but raw. Elijah was steel, hardened, sharp. He drilled them like a silent commander. Not because he trusted them, but because he couldn't let Delgado win. Not again. And maybe, just maybe, he wanted to believe in something again. When the sun dipped below the mesa that final evening, the silence between them felt heavier than any storm. Elijah stood at the gate, watching May mount her horse. Don't come back, he said coldly. May nodded. We won't. But before they could ride off, he tossed her a small pouch, gold coins. Enough to make it across the border without begging. May caught it mid-air, surprised. Why? Elijah didn't answer, just turned and walked back toward the ranch house. The barn door creaked shut behind him, and for the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't quite name. Not peace, not trust, but maybe purpose. The black rancher eyed them cautiously. Years of solitude had sharpened his instincts, and while their tone was pleading, the weapons at their belts and the ragged desperation in their eyes made him hesitate. But something in the way the youngest outlaw clutched his side, blood soaking through his shirt, softened the rancher's heart just a bit. He gestured toward the barn, his voice rough and commanding, telling them to leave their weapons and take the wounded inside. The others exchanged quick glances, then obeyed, slowly placing pistols on the ground and carrying their injured comrade. Inside, the dusty air was thick with silence. Trust was not given freely here, especially not to men with bounties on their heads. As the night rolled in and coyotes howled in the distance, the rancher sat alone on his porch, a shotgun resting across his lap. Inside the barn, the outlaws murmured among themselves. He didn't sleep that night. He just watched the horizon, wondering what kind of mess had stepped onto his land. At dawn, he made a pot of strong coffee and approached the barn. The injured outlaw was feverish, and without medical attention, he wouldn't last the day. Reluctantly, the rancher saddled his old horse and rode out to fetch supplies from a nearby town, risking recognition. He hadn't shown his face in that town in years, Not since the incident that had driven him into exile. The townsfolk still whispered about him, the black rancher who vanished after the fire, after the trial, after burying everyone he ever cared about. When he entered the dusty general store, the room fell silent. Eyes followed him, murmurs rippled. But he didn't flinch. He grabbed bandages, whiskey, and dried meat, tossed some coins on the counter, and left without a word. The clerk didn't dare question him. Back at the ranch, the outlaws were surprised by his return. Most men would have let them rot. But he wasn't like most men. He had once believed in second chances, and maybe, just maybe, he wasn't ready to abandon that part of himself. Days passed. The fever broke, and the wounded man slowly regained his strength. During that time, something strange happened. The other outlaws, men raised on theft and mistrust, began helping around the ranch. One fixed a broken fence, another fed the horses, and the youngest cleaned the tool shed without being asked. The rancher said nothing, just watched with a quiet skepticism. Still, the change was real. Around the campfire at night, stories were exchanged, and for the first time in years, laughter echoed through the canyon. The rancher didn't join them, but he listened from the shadows. And something stirred in him, something long buried, belonging. One evening, as a blood-red sunset painted the sky, the leader of the outlaws approached him. He was older than the others, with scars etched deep into his skin and eyes that had seen too much. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He simply said, "We've done wrong, but we're tired of running." The rancher didn't respond right away. He stared at the horizon, his jaw clenched. Then, after a long pause, he said, "Everyone runs from something. But if you stop here, you help build. No more stealing. No more blood." The outlaw nodded, and in that moment, a pact was made, not in words, but in shared pain and possibility. The next weeks were unlike anything the rancher had known in years. The ranch buzzed with life again. He taught the outlaws how to brand cattle, how to repair saddles, how to till soil. They listened, fumbled, laughed, cursed, and learned. The days were long, the work hard, but there was pride in it. At night, they'd eat together, seated around a table that had been gathering dust for too long. The rancher never said it, but the silence that once consumed the land had been replaced by something warmer, companionship. The ghosts of his past still lingered, but for the first time, they didn't haunt him. They watched. But peace, especially in the West, was never made to last. One morning, the rancher saw a cloud of dust on the road. Riders. He raised his spyglass and cursed under his breath. Deputies. Maybe bounty hunters. They were coming fast, maybe 10 or 12. The outlaws saw it too, panic flashing in their eyes. The rancher turned to them, calm and cold. "This is your fight now," he said. "But if you run, you prove them right. Stand your ground, show them who you've become." The leader nodded, and for the first time, the outlaws didn't run. They prepared. They didn't prepare for war, but for proof. They gathered ledgers showing their recent work, the earnings they hadn't stolen, the repairs they'd done. The rancher sent a message to the town sheriff, inviting him to see for himself. When the posse arrived, hands near their holsters, the rancher stood in front of his gate, alone. He spoke clearly, firmly, telling them the truth. How these men had changed, how the ranch had changed, how maybe the law could show the same mercy it once denied him. Some deputies laughed. But the sheriff, an old friend turned enemy, dismounted and walked through the ranch. He saw the fences, the livestock, the crops beginning to sprout. He watched the former outlaws sweat under the sun, hauling hay and fixing shingles. He recognized their effort, and the black rancher's word. After a long silence, he tipped his hat and said, "We'll be watching." Then he turned his horse and rode off, his men following behind. The rancher didn't smile, but his shoulders loosened. That night, the fire crackled louder than ever. No one celebrated, not out loud. But in their hearts, They knew this land was now a chance at redemption. And that was more powerful than any gun. As months passed, word spread. Other drifters came, not to steal, but to work. The ranch grew. The Black Rancher, once a man buried in silence, now stood at the center of a community he hadn't asked for, but had built. The Outlaws, now ranchers themselves, stood by him like brothers. And though the past never truly let go, it no longer ruled him. He'd learned that trust wasn't given, it was earned. That help could come from unlikely places. And that redemption, no matter how far gone it seemed, could ride in on tired horses and weathered faces. And so the story lived on. But as the days passed, something unexpected began to happen. The Outlaws, hardened and ragged, started pitching in. One fixed the fence, another mended a leaking water trough. The youngest of them, no older than 20, took to feeding the horses at sunrise without being asked. The rancher, still cautious, watched everything from a distance, arms always folded, rifle never far from reach. But he couldn't deny what he was seeing. Men who were used to taking were suddenly giving back. It rattled him. He found himself staying up late, sitting on the porch with a pipe between his lips, staring at the moon and wondering what the hell was happening on his land. One morning, he woke up to the smell of bacon, not burning, but cooked just right. He grabbed his rifle, thinking it might be a trap, but when he stepped into the kitchen, he found the leader of the gang, Buck, flipping eggs like it was Sunday at Grandma's house. "Thought you might like a break from your own cooking," Buck said, not even turning around. The rancher didn't speak. He just stared, then slowly sat at the table. It was the first meal he'd shared with another man in 10 years. And for the first time in just as long, he actually finished every bite, not because he was hungry, but because it felt human. Later that week, while repairing the barn roof together, Buck finally broke the silence. "We used to be worse men," he said, hammering nails like each one carried a confession. "But we ain't runnin' no more. Not from the law, not from ourselves." The rancher looked at him, skeptical but curious. There was something raw in Buck's voice, something that sounded like truth. And as the wind swept across the plains, the two men sat side by side, wordless again, but somehow understanding each other deeper than any words ever could. That night, the rancher had a dream. In it, he saw his father, standing by the old barn, smiling but saying nothing. The last time he had dreamed of his father, it ended in shouting and gunfire. But this time, there was peace. He woke up with tears in his eyes and didn't wipe them away. Instead, he walked out to the campfire, where the outlaws were drinking weak coffee and telling old lies. Without a word, he sat down next to them. They nodded, offered him a mug, and he took it. That moment, that quiet sharing of coffee under the stars, marked the first time he didn't feel like a man alone on his land. Over the following weeks, a strange bond formed. They built things, fixed things, talked, argued, laughed. The outlaws, once shadows in the desert, became part of the ranch's heartbeat. The rancher, still gruff and quiet, became their anchor. Even his horse started warming up to the gang, letting them brush his mane without biting. The whole place felt different, warmer, livelier. The scars of silence and solitude began to fade. And the man who once trusted no one started leaving his rifle inside the house when he stepped out, a silent declaration that the world might not be so cruel after all. Then, just as quickly as they came, the outlaws announced it was time to move on. No reason, no trouble, just that the wind was calling them elsewhere. The rancher said nothing, only gave each man a nod and a handshake, some longer than others. When it came time for Buck to leave, the two stood face to face, neither knowing what to say. Finally, Buck said, "We leave pieces of ourselves wherever we find home." And the rancher, with a steady hand, reached into his coat and pulled out an old silver spur, his father's, and placed it in Buck's hand. "Then take a piece of mine," he said. Days turned to weeks, and the ranch was quiet again. But not lonely. The silence no longer felt heavy, because it carried memories, of stories told by the fire, of shared meals, of laughter echoing through the barn. The rancher found himself waking early just to walk the perimeter, half hoping to see a silhouette in the morning fog. And sometimes, he swore he could still hear the creak of boots on wood or the faint whistle of a tune no one remembered teaching. Life had returned to the land, and to the man who once wanted nothing but solitude. One morning, while tending to the horses, the rancher noticed something wedged beneath the post where Buck always tied his mare. A folded scrap of leather. Inside, carved with a knife, were the words, "We trusted you too." No name. No signature. Just that simple message. He ran his fingers across the carving like a blind man reading scripture. For the first time in years, he smiled without restraint. And right there, next to the corral, he laughed. A deep, rumbling laugh that scared the horses and sent a hawk flying into the sky. From that day forward, the ranch became more than a place of hiding, it became a place of healing. Travelers passing through were offered water, food, sometimes even a story. Some stayed a day, others a season. And though the rancher never called anyone friend, they all called him Sir, with respect in their voice. He taught the young ones how to ride, told the old ones where to find shade, and when winter came, he opened his doors wider than ever before. The man who once locked his heart now lived with it wide open, not recklessly, but bravely. So if you ever find yourself riding west and stumble upon a black ranch nestled between two hills, don't be surprised if the man on the porch offers you coffee before you even speak. Don't be surprised if he doesn't ask where you came from, just where you're going. And if you sit long enough, he might just tell you about the day a band of outlaws came begging for help and left something far greater behind. A lesson in trust. A spark of brotherhood. A reason to believe again. Now, if that story touched you, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to this channel. We've got more stories of grit, heart, and redemption coming your way.